What's going on, podcast world, podcast family? Spencer Davis here, back with another episode of the Church Voice podcast, here with my co-host
Tyler Rhodes. What's going on?
Yeah, buddy. So here we're back with another one this week, and we are so excited to be with you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast, supporting, and just getting behind it. I pray that you guys are enjoying our time together. I know I'm enjoying it. Are you enjoying doing this podcast?
Oh, for sure.
I just love it. It gives me life and energy. And so I pray that it's just doing the same for you guys. And I pray you're growing and learning how to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus, because that's what this is all about, is adopting the lifestyle of Jesus and building the body of Christ through a variety of voices. And of course, our podcast is completely sponsored, supported, and recorded at Christian Center Church, here in South Bend, Indiana. You can find our website at christiancenter.org. You can find us at church-voice-podcast. And of course, check out the website and everything going on here at the church as usual. And of course, our executive and presidential producer, Austin Lance, who does a great job on the podcast. We appreciate him so much. So, Pastor Tyler, how's it going today?
Oh, I'm doing good, man.
Good.
Yeah, really good.
Good.
Parker and I are having our first daddy-daughter date tonight.
Oh, snap.
So, yeah, Dentine is having some ladies over. Actually, I think Taylor's going over.
Yeah, I found out about that last night. Yep. My schedule for the evening is accounted for.
I tell you what, that girls group got us dads busy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and they don't tell nobody.
No, they don't.
Maybe your wife tells you, but my wife's like, I know whenever my wife starts, like if I call her or she calls, really it's when she calls me and she says, so I'm like, oh no. Like it just, so that was one of those. She was like, I kind of got a little bit of a girls' night. And I was like, oh my goodness. So anyway, girls' night.
They're going to enjoy themselves. Yeah. But so Dentine told me, she just also proceeded to tell me that they're having like a dip party. Like it's like a bring your own dip. I'm serious.
Okay.
It's a bring your own dip. And I'm making the dip that Dentine is bringing. She was like, hey, we're having a bring your own dip party. Yeah. I was like, I've never heard of that.
Me neither.
She was like, well, it'll be lots of fun.
It's going to be great.
It'll be a blast.
Yeah.
And she was like, so I need you to make your dip.
Okay.
I'm like, I'm making the dip for your party? She was like, yeah.
See, my wife didn't even come close to asking me. I am like so dip opposed. I am opposed to all dips.
Really?
Taylor is a dip freak. She probably came up with the idea. She's probably like, let's have a dip party. Cause like Taylor will eat dip and chips for dinner.
Oh, I would.
And
too.
I'm like, like she did that early on in our marriage. And I was like, she made like this, and she was so pumped. Like she made this like rotel with like meat and like, and it was good. But I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, where's dinner? And she was like, this is dinner. And I was like, no, it's not. And so we had a whole thing. So awesome. I'm sure she's just going to be in dip heaven
for sure tonight. So if you were making the dip, you just give her a bowl of French onion. So be on your way.
I've never made a dip in my life and I won't. I won't.
Wow.
I won't.
That is extra.
I eat real food.
And I won't.
Oh my goodness. So we've already got the medicine flowing. All right.
Yeah.
Cause laughter does good like medicine.
Exactly.
But, I just can't help it. Cause we were talking about it as we were going in. I hear that you've got something to tell our listening audience about your life and family history.
I do. This may explain a lot about me. Yeah. Or it may not.
Yeah. Well, it does. It did for me.
This is why sometimes I'll talk trash. Like, is he cutting a promo on me right now? My uncle was a professional wrestler. He's gone on to be with the Lord.
Yes.
So that's why I say was.
Mm-hmm.
But for most of his adult life, he was a professional wrestler.
Really?
Like when I say professional wrestler, I don't mean he did, especially near the end of his life, he was in a lot of the regional circuits. But I'm talking like NWA professional wrestler, like 70s, 80s, like back then.
Not Ice Cube.
No, not Ice Cube. I think he was the furthest thing from Ice Cube. His wrestling name was Mike the Beef Rhodes.
Mike the Beef.
And I love him. He's so awesome. One of my favorite family members.
Yeah.
He was so funny. But like if you saw him, I gotta tell the truth. If you saw him, you'd be like, this dude looks like a slab of beef. Like that's an appropriate nickname for the man. Yeah. He also was like a clown. Like he played a second character, and he was like this killer clown.
Wow.
Yeah. He was a jobber.
Yeah.
Do you know what a jobber means?
I don't. I said yeah like I did, but I don't.
You did. I was like, do you know what
yeah.
So a jobber is someone whose sole purpose is to lose.
Really?
And to make the winner look better.
I always knew that was a thing, but I never knew there was a name for it.
Yeah, that's the name. So like he's on the roster to come in and lose.
Really?
Wow. That was his role.
Yeah.
He actually ended up getting fired. If we've got any old school wrestling fans listening.
Yeah.
He was in a tag team match with Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. And I forget who his tag partner was. It was another no name, I'm pretty sure. And Tully Blanchard kept hitting him with real punches. And like, if someone listening doesn't know wrestling is fake, spoiler. Yeah. It's not real.
Right.
So like, they hit each other with fake punches.
Yeah.
Well, he was hitting him square on the nose with real punches.
For real?
And my uncle wasn't having it.
Yeah.
Cause I mean, he's a lot like me and my dad. We just don't roll like that.
Right.
So, he gets mad and, starts hitting him back with real punches. And ends up busting his nose.
For real?
Yeah. So my uncle has to lay down and let them pin him.
Yeah.
So that the match can get over. And they go in the back and they all get into this big brawl back in the locker room.
For real?
Yep. And Vince McMahon calls my uncle into his office, lets him go.
Dude, that's crazy, man.
Hey, that's a way to go out, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you're going to go out, make wrestling real and you'll get fired.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's
Start
funny.
hitting him with real punches.
That's funny.
But those guys, they were stars. They could do whatever they want, especially way back then.
Oh yeah.
They could do whatever they wanted. And, my uncle wasn't having it.
Yeah.
But, that's a part of the Rhodes family history.
What was his name again? Tell us one more time.
Mike the Beef Rhodes.
Mike the Beef.
Yeah. At one point, I think I was 8 or 9, and we had went to go see him at one of his shows in Georgia. This was one of the more regional things.
Yeah.
So there's like 50 people in the audience.
Right.
Half of them are drunk. I mean, just imagine the most redneck thing you've ever seen.
The best place for a 9-year-old boy.
Pretty sure one guy brought his recliner. I'm like, well, I don't know what's going on here. Kick back. And, so he had this tag team match and all. I had a dream that night.
Yeah.
That I was his tag team partner. My name was Stewie. For the sole reason that our tag team name was Beef Stew.
Beef Stew. I think you missed your destiny,
Beef
bro.
Stew. I did.
I think you missed your calling.
The calling on my life is not to be here.
It was Stewie.
It's to be the stew to his beef.
Okay, don't ever say that again. Moving on.
What's funny?
Moving on. What's funny? No, you're done.
I've got more places to go. What's funny is I told him about that dream.
Yeah.
And that made his day.
Yeah.
He was like, yep, so he called me Stewie.
Yeah.
for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
Dude, that's awesome.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yes, moving on. We have to get past that. So yeah, there's our history lesson for the day. Podcast done. Podcast over.
It's over.
Yeah. Well,
that is the most interesting thing we will talk about today. No, I'm just kidding.
Pretty much. No, I'm just kidding. We've got a good, historical guest today. And it's a pretty popular one, especially if you are of the Catholic persuasion. But we're going to talk about Benedict of Nursia. Benedict of Nursia. And we're going to talk about Benedict's rule, right? So he wrote a list of rules, for, monasteries. And so what we're going to talk about today is included in that list of rules. And I think it's a good one. I think it's pretty significant, especially for this day and age for multiple reasons. Mm-hmm. And so, we'll just bring some relevancy to that. But he was actually born in 480 AD and died in 547 AD. So this is way, way back.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that honestly until just now.
Yeah.
That this was like really far back.
I think this is the furthest we've gone back. To talk about somebody.
Yeah. I think so. And he is often considered the father of Western monasticism, as his rule for monastic living became the norm in monastic spirituality in Europe. And obviously monasticism was a very popular movement. And I mean, that was like everything.
Especially at this time.
Oh yeah, for sure. At this time, monasticism was it. And Benedict's rule promotes community, maturity, and humility by centering life around 4 elements: prayer, work, study, and rest. Each day was literally broken down into those 4 categories. So that was all that they did, all that they focused on. And even as I kind of skimmed through, this was like the Benedict's rule is like a 32-page document with different rules concerning a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
And literally every last one of those rules in that document really centered on this. So I can just attest to that, having kind of skimmed through it. Honestly, I want to go back and read the whole thing. I know a lot of it's not applicable to today.
Right.
Because again, monasticism is monks and nuns and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, there was some deep stuff in there. Just things to stay away from, things to, ways to conduct yourself and everything like that. I think there's something there. And what we're going to talk about today, we'll hit on that a little bit. But you brought the quote, so I'm going to have you share and just kind of jump off the conversation a little bit.
Yeah. And I know, and so we've done this sort of thing before with Brother Lawrence. And, this is something that is a real passion point for me is making, monastic spirituality. That's probably a very controversial way to say it, but the contemplative way of life, contemplative prayer, the contemplative lifestyle, to make that relevant to our day and age is a deep passion point for me.
Yeah.
Because let's be real, Benedict he's what we would consider a hermit. And promoted what we would call
hermetism.
Hermetism. I don't know if that's a real thing.
That sounds like a medical condition. I take that back.
I got hermetism. Wow. Okay.
Sorry. So we're on a roll today.
We are.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
This is going to be so entertaining. But I think that, so no, I don't think that we should all go live in monasteries and to try and keep ourselves completely unstained from the world. But we are supposed to do that in heart. James says friendship with the world is hostility toward God. So a lot of these principles, we can take and apply them that way.
Yep.
And, so I want to read, this is from chapter 53, from Benedict's rule. He says this. He says, all guests who present themselves are to be welcomed as Christ. For he himself will say, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. That's Matthew 25:35 that he quotes. So what he's saying is anytime a guest comes into the monastery, specifically here, he's talking about when they come for a meal.
Yeah.
But even outside of that, people did and still do go stay as guests in monasteries. That's side note. That's something I would like to do at some point. Go spend a few days.
That sounds like a wonderful
monastery.
sabbatical.
It does.
Yeah.
It really does. I know of a pastor. I don't know this guy personally. I know of a pastor who went and spent 4 weeks at a monastery. Yeah. And just, it changed his life.
Really?
Being in that kind of atmosphere.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that I say that because like literally I can only imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's such a foreign concept to especially Christianity today.
Yeah, it is.
And faith today and how we live our lives. And like, so yeah, I literally, when I say that, I mean that, like, I can only imagine what that would be like.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. So what Benedict is saying here is he's talking about one of the core elements for him of monastic living is loving Christ and loving others to the degree that you are always hospitable, no matter who comes in, when they come in, why they're coming in.
Yeah.
That everybody who comes into that monastery should be welcomed as Christ.
Yeah.
And I think that hospitality is something that's lost in Christianity today. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, not the magazine, yeah. Christianity Today. What's interesting is that
I just caught that.
I know. Yeah. That was stupid.
Christianity Today never writes about hospitality.
Not the magazine. I actually don't mind the magazine. Whatever. So I think the scripture talks more about hospitality than we would think. And I think that what I pay attention to, and it's not like the Southern hospitality thing where when someone comes into your house, they feel welcome.
Yeah.
I don't think hospitality is them feeling welcomed. I think that's a part of it.
Yeah.
I think hospitality is a person feeling loved.
Yeah.
That a person feels like they are at home there.
Yeah.
Not that they're at your home,
right?
But that they are at home.
Yeah.
Like when they're with you, it is a safe and comfortable place and a loving place to the degree that they feel like they can kick back, put their feet on your end table.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those kind of things. And I think one thing that should be highlighted was the hospitality of Jesus. Mm-hmm. Not because Jesus had people over to his house all the time. Right. He had nowhere to lay his head.
Yeah.
But it was interesting that he would be invited to their houses, yet he was the one who was hospitable. Mm-hmm. That he would go in and it would be such a loving and comfortable place that he's at a Pharisee's house and this prostitute comes in, breaks this alabaster jar and it's like anoints his feet and is like wiping it off with her tears and with her hair. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, you got to think about how weird that would be.
Yeah.
Like someone walking up in your house and feeling so comfortable, so drawn to Jesus that they can do that.
Yeah.
And so what I began to think is when I read this quote, I began to think how magnetic Jesus was. Mm-hmm. He would walk up to the disciples. Well, before they were the disciples, you know, Peter, James, and John are out fishing and Andrew, and he's like, come follow me. And they're like, okay.
Yeah.
And they leave everything and follow him. Mm-hmm. And so I began to think, am I as hospitable or magnetic as Jesus is?
Yeah.
Are people drawn to Christ in me, the hope of glory? Do people feel safe and at home and loved and cared for around me? Now, the conclusion I came to myself is no.
Right. Right.
But
I'm like, yeah, right. No,
right,
totally.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. But it's something that we need to talk about. And because, and I love the quotation here, Matthew 25:35, and that whole passage there is talking about the sheep and the goats, this big parable that Jesus gives. Yeah. That's verses 31 to 46. And he says, he talks to the sheep and he says, you know, I was hungry and you fed me.
Right.
I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison, or I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison, you visited me. And then the goats, he says the opposite. You did not do these things. And then he finishes up with what you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me. And elsewhere, Jesus says, whoever gives a cup of water to these little ones in my name.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
right.
Wow.
Yeah.
The kinds of things that well, I didn't finish the quote. He says, you've done it to me.
Yeah.
You've done it for me and to me.
Yep.
And I think that that's something that's important for us to talk about. So I wanted to put that out there, that idea of the hospitality of Jesus.
Yeah.
And to kind of launch the conversation that way.
Yeah. Well, what jumps out at me is exactly what the quote says. You said, do I have that same sort of welcome and warming, you know, do I exude that? And I think the reason, exactly what the quote says, in order for us to exude that Christ-like comfort and at-homeness with other people, we have to see exactly what Benedict said. We have to see the Christ-likeness.
Exactly.
Or even if we don't see the Christ-likeness, even if they're completely opposite of us, we still see Christ in them, in serving them in all humility and in all hospitality. And it's so interesting because as you read this specific section of Benedict's rule, like they literally, like when he says present them are to be welcomed as Christ, they literally went to a level of adoration toward these guests.
Oh yeah.
Like they literally, and I hope I'm not jumping ahead of you, but like they literally would, a part of it was one, bowing down to them to the point of being prostrate before them, like laying on their face before their guests. They would read scripture to their guests so that they could be edified. They would literally wash their feet I mean, like, that's just such a foreign concept to us. But again, what they were doing, yes, this person may not be Jesus in the flesh, but they were treating every single person who came as if they were Christ. And so that's such a powerful concept, because my thing is, okay, how often do I bend over backwards for the guest or for the person who's approaching me or who I'm approaching? How often am I really esteeming them above myself? And I think that's the key to what Jesus did, is like, you talked about the woman with the alabaster, like, he esteemed her. Like, yes, she was doing something that was important for his burial, and we know the purpose of what she was doing, but he esteemed her more highly than himself. Like, the Son of God esteemed others more highly than himself. Like, he put others before himself and served them in that way. That's why they felt comforted. That's why they felt at home following him, because he had this certain esteem for those who were around him. And like, to me, this is so relevant because in my first thought went to the very prevalent homeless population, both in South Bend and really across the board. I think any halfway major city has a homeless population and some would call a problem. And I think that a lot of times, and I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it, you know, especially when you're inundated with it and you've always got people, you know, coming up to your window or whatever. And how often do we esteem them? Because, and here's what's important. And here's why I'm saying this, because at first it's like, oh, okay, you esteem guests who are of the same mind and, you know, blah, 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 and, you know, whatever. But Benedict says in this rule, he's like, no, he says, even more so, even more intently, even more purposefully, the poor and the stranger. Exactly. And when he says the stranger, he's talking about like, no, people who don't believe what you believe, you know, and even more so the poor. And I think of how many times we try to avoid the poor and the stranger. We try to avoid those who are begging from us, and like, that's not God's heart, you know. And I get that we can't like giving, you know what I mean? Like, I get that, but at the same time, we can make them feel welcome. We can make them feel at home. And I understand this is maybe a different application because they're not coming to our home. They're not, you know, I can understand that. But just like Jesus didn't have a home and he traveled around and like, but he always made people feel welcome and at home and like they had a place to be with him, you know? And so I think we have to shift our perspective. I'm thinking about it a lot more, even if I don't have anything to give you, or even if I don't want to give you anything, right? You know, whether I've given you something before or whatever, I should still esteem you and really bend over backwards and adore you and make you feel like Christ in that moment. Does that make sense? Because that's what the Lord does for us. That's what that's what he would have us do to others. Yeah. And so it's such a different perspective, you know, because again, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I may not be able to wash every foot that comes across my path, but how can I bend over backwards? How can I esteem that person more highly than myself? How can I give them the time of day? How can I put myself aside in that interaction? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's one thing that really jumped out at me is just those kind of interactions, those kind of things. Cause so many times we avoid them, or we grip our steering wheel and we keep our eyes forward and we don't make eye contact. You know what I mean? But like, what would happen if you rolled down your window and you just spoke to them, or you interacted with them, or you esteem them, or even when they come knocking on your window, you know what I'm saying? Like, I get that we're all busy and we all have lives, but how can we approach those situations differently? And again, that's just an example. Right. If someone comes to your home, that's a whole nother deal.
Yeah.
And I'll just share one story and I'll let you go.
You good.
But like in this instance, I realized, wait, that's maybe something that the Lord would do. But we were living, so when me and my wife first got married, right? We were living on East Donald Street over by Riley High School in South Bend, Indiana, right? I grew up on that side of town. So like we got the house and I was like, oh yeah, it'll be cool. It was rough. That's all I'll say. You know, Plasma Center is like right down the street. You know, it's like, it's just, and I'm not saying anything that's not common knowledge. It's a rougher part of town. It's a rough place to live. And I remember we were there for a while and I had this little blue truck, little blue rust bucket, man, 88 Chevy, loved it though. So I had my little blue truck and I remember I was home one day early from work and I was taking a nap and I heard this bang at my door and it's like boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, who is that? Yeah. You know, and I get up and I look and it's this guy, his name was Mike, right? I didn't know his name was Mike at the time. His name is Mike. And Mike's at my door. He's got Coolio braids, right? The Coolio, you know, single braids kind of poking out of the top of his head, shirt off, drenched in sweat. And he's like, hey, bro, hey. He's like, what you do? I'm like, man, I'm taking a nap. What do you need something? Like, what's going on? He's like, yeah, man, can I borrow your truck? I was like, can you do what? Like, can you what? You know? And of course, my first instinct is like, bruh, get off of my doorstep. Yeah. Like, you know, like you borrow my truck. Are you out of your mind? And I don't know. In that moment, I was like, no, you can't borrow my truck. And he was like, well, he's like, man, we just trying to, you know, I'm trying to move my buddy's stuff down the street, da, da, da. And I was like, well, I said, you can't borrow my truck, but I can help you move. And so like, we literally, like I took the rest of my afternoon. We got in the truck. I helped them move some stuff down the road. And I had no idea who these people were. And like, it ended up being a great connection. I saw Mike a couple times. We prayed together. Like, it was just this beautiful thing. But in that moment, like God gave me the grace to extend that grace to him. And I didn't get a good chance to go to sleep. I didn't get a chance to take my nap. I had to go out of my way. I spent the rest of my afternoon help. But at the same time, I feel like that was a moment, and it was just a moment that I thought of, you know, before this conversation. That was a moment where like that grace came through me and I was able to esteem him as Christ. Like if Jesus knocked on my door and asked to borrow my truck and needed my help moving, I'm going. What I'm gonna do? Yeah. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna get up and go. So that's just an example. But you know, it's those kind of moments that we've got to really be intentional about.
That's a great example, and I appreciate you sharing it. And it's interesting because I am more likely to serve and to give, you know, time, energy, resources, thoughts, prayers to all those kind of things. People to whom I see as a person to be served rather than a person to be pitied. And the vast majority of the time when, I don't want to say that, sometimes when I give, it's because I pity someone. It's because I'm at a Christian concert and here they go passing out pictures of little kids who want to be sponsored. And not that that's a bad thing. I'm not trying to make fun. But it is kind of cliche. Yeah. You're at a Christian concert. They pass out these kids. I remember one time, here's a funny example of that. When I was a youth pastor in Alabama, we went to a Carrie Job concert and they start passing out kids. So I'm with the youth group. I've got like 13-year-olds crying saying, I'm going to support this kid, you know, for $23 a month. I'm like, you ain't got no job. How, like, what are you going to do? Yeah. How are you going to support this kid? They were like, I don't know, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to support them. I'm like, this is going to sound terrible. I would advise against that.
Yes. Like, you need support. Yeah. Like, I paid for your ticket to get here.
Exactly. And, of course, you know, I don't think any of those lasted very long. Yeah. But when people play on our emotions like that, when they catch us right at the right moment, when we want to pity somebody, you know, then we'll give them a few bucks, or then we'll do this and then we'll do that. And I don't know how much of a difference it makes whenever we do it because of pity. No. Not that that's the worst thing in the world that we're helping somebody, but I just don't know. I don't know how much of a consequential difference it makes because I think people know when we esteem them and when we don't.
Right.
I know I do.
Right.
I know when someone does something for me, and they do it because of pity, I can pick up on that.
Oh yeah, for
I'm
sure.
still grateful
for sure
that they helped.
Yeah.
But I can tell.
Oh yeah.
But when someone does it because they love me, they esteem me, they appreciate me, that's totally different.
Yeah.
That ministers. That doesn't just help. That ministers.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that it's the exact same way with other people.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important. He doesn't just say every guest who comes in needs to be welcomed. He doesn't say every guest that comes in needs their feet washed.
Yeah.
Every guest that comes in, we need to make them a free meal.
Right.
He says every guest needs to be welcomed as Christ.
As Christ.
Because
that's critical.
And this is what I love, what he says next. He says, because Christ says, he gives the quote from Matthew 25:35. And it's interesting to me because what Benedict is saying is that he knows that this monastery is going to give an account to Christ of how they welcomed strangers, how they welcomed the poor, how they welcomed the sick, and all those kinds of things. Because when the sick, this wasn't in chapter 53, but when the sick would come in to the monastery, they would take them in and care for them.
Yeah.
It's exactly what they would do. They would nurse them back to health and then send them back on.
Yeah.
Some people would stay on as monks. Some people would leave and go back at it. But when you decide in your heart to welcome everybody that way, whether you end up quote unquote helping or not, and it is important to help. I don't want to say that, but whether you end up helping physically, financially, whatever or not, that servanthood mentality is going to minister to them, that humility. Yeah. What did Jesus say in Matthew 20? The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. Yeah. And to give his life as a ransom for many. So if Jesus came to serve humanity, surely I can serve humanity. Surely I'm not so puffed up that I can't think I can't serve other people or that people are beneath me. Yeah. And I think it's important that we live our lives in that way.
And when we're when we have the tendency to serve who we deem servable,
exactly,
that's just religious. That's pharisaic. That's prideful. You know what I mean? Like it's easy for me to serve, the lead pastor or serve, like when they come, you clean up the house and you da. But like, when the person comes to, meet with you or have a conversation that's not of that stature, it's like, we can just, whatever. And it's like, no, like treat them how you would treat I guess maybe that's a practical application. Like, and I hate saying this because we should have the Jesus mentality of, okay, treat them like they're Jesus. But okay, imagine this. Imagine your lead pastor is there in that position or in that place, or they're coming to your house. Like roll out the red carpet, and we should roll out the red carpet for everybody, in both in word and in deed. And I think that that's critical. So, honestly, that's just something for food for thought. Just something for us to think about. Cause I'm like, man, how can I do this better? How can I, number one, show the love of Christ, but also see Christ in every single person. That's just that's a profound concept that I think we've all got to get a hold of. And not just those we see, not just those we deem as Christ-like, whether it's a brother or a sister in Christ, the stranger and the poor as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and there's a couple other things I want to hit on, but I mean, let's just look at another place in scripture where Jesus says something very similar. In Luke chapter 8, he says, whenever you throw a banquet, don't throw it for your family or for the rich people in society or for your civic leaders. Throw it for the poor and the sick and the lame and the maimed, because they can't pay you back. Yeah. And that to me was so heavy. Reading that is Jesus is saying, okay, it's not bad to have a dip party for your friends. It's not bad to have your family over for dinner.
Dip sucks. I'm sorry.
Wow.
My bad. I got out of control.
Well, you ain't getting no leftovers.
I don't want none. That's the problem.
It ain't bad.
Only dip that counts is guacamole. The only dip that matters is guacamole.
Wow. I actually don't like guacamole.
Okay. Get out.
Okay.
We're done.
See ya. It ain't bad to throw a dip party for your friends.
No.
It's not bad to have your family over for dinner. It's not bad to have your lead pastor over. But it's important to serve and to do and to give to those who can't pay you back.
But how many banquets are we throwing for the poor?
Right. Exactly.
Ooh.
Exactly.
That's just like, and I'm not trying to be all deep and like, but like really, how many banquets are we throwing for the poor?
Me? Zero. Yeah.
Zero. And I'm saying the same thing. And so like, let's take a note of that.
Exactly.
Like, and again, I don't know how to do it.
Right.
But really, how many banquets are we throwing for the poor?
Exactly.
And that's just, I think that's what we want to get across today.
Exactly.
Is let's really take a hard look at that.
Yeah, exactly. And there was one thing I wanted to hit on, and you touched on it earlier. And I think that it's important. We are such in a hurry.
Yeah.
In our society today. One scholar calls it hurry sickness. I love that phrase.
Oh, for sure.
Because he's absolutely right in describing hurry as a sickness.
I'm chronically ill then.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, I think most of us are.
Oh, yeah.
And we are such in a hurry that when we see, the man out at the red light out at Kroger with the cardboard box that says, please help, God bless.
Yeah.
We're such in a hurry to get to this appointment, that appointment, get home, get to that restaurant. And I'm answering the phone call. People are texting while they're driving. All of these things are going on. We're such in a hurry.
Yeah.
We can't take 30 seconds to stop over.
Right.
And I say I don't take 30 seconds
straight up. Yeah.
to stop over and just, and be calm enough, aware enough of what's going on around me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was sitting in the doctor's office the other day. I took Parker to the dreaded chiropractor.
Yeah.
Like you think. We love the chiropractor, but we were sitting in there and I was looking around.
I was going to say they're the devil, but I know your sister's going to chiropractic
Dip
school.
is the devil to you.
Well, the chiropractor's next.
The chiropractor's next. She is going into chiropractics. Yeah. Anyway.
She's not the devil.
Thanks. I appreciate that. But I was sitting in the chiropractor and I noticed everybody was on their phone. People may think that's unrelated, that an addiction to technology and hurry are unrelated. I don't think that.
No, not at all.
I don't think that, because that's still the constant, you're constantly moving, constantly doing something. Like we can't just sit still.
You're hurrying through the Facebook
where we are.
videos.
Exactly.
You're hurrying through your news feed.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there with Parker and I'm like, okay, I could get on my phone right now and pass the time, but I would miss a moment with my daughter to just to hang out, to be there, to talk to her.
Yep.
God forbid we talk to our children in a public place.
Oh,
I mean, and it's not that being on your phone is always bad. And it's not that those people are bad people. I don't know who any of them are.
Yeah.
And I know way too often I do that. But we're just in such in a hurry. We're not even aware of what's going on. How often do we pass by the homeless people and not even see them?
Yeah.
Not even really realize that they're there. We pass by people in the church who are struggling, people in the grocery store, whatever it is, that we're just not even aware enough. And to me, that is something, I talk about this a lot, and it's because I'm not doing it. I talk about how Jesus was not in a hurry.
Yeah.
He was the most efficient you could be in ministry ever.
Yeah.
So scholars believe he ministered, 3 to 3.5 years, something like that. I mean, he saved the world in 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do no better than that.
That's good.
You can't do no better than that.
Yeah.
And you and I have both, quote unquote, been in vocational ministry longer than that. And we ain't come close.
I ain't saving the world.
No, not at all. And so he was the most efficient you could ever be.
Yeah.
He wasn't in a hurry.
Yeah.
He could be on the way to Jairus' house to raise up his daughter who was on her deathbed.
Yeah.
And still stop and feel the power going out from him and stop and speak to the woman with the issue of blood.
Yeah.
And even though she was already healed,
right,
Jesus looked at her and said, your faith has made you well.
Yeah. To even interact with her.
Right.
He didn't even have to.
Right.
Yeah.
If the power's gone out and she's healed,
cool.
If that's what mattered, then just keep going.
Right.
But that wasn't the main thing that mattered. Of course it matters, but that wasn't the main thing that mattered. It was her.
Yeah.
She's what mattered.
Yeah.
And he stopped, made sure to look her in her eyes. Because, he stops and Peter's like, what do you mean who touched you?
Right.
Like this crowd is pressing in on you. And Jesus is like, no, there's something different here. And I've got to stop and be aware and make sure this person gets what they need. And I'm not like that enough.
Yeah.
I'm so often, I'm so hurry sick that I've got, and I know other people are this way, got this latent presence of anxiety that's kind of always there.
Yep.
And we're just constantly moving on to whatever's next.
Yeah.
And I think that is a huge hindrance to serving people, to viewing them as Christ.
Yep.
This is what I'm about to say is about to sting. I don't want to stand before Christ and him say, how can you be so busy that you don't treat people like me? Like I'm too busy to see people as Jesus. Right. Because all I care about is what's going on in my world.
Yeah. And what you're saying is that we can't slow down enough to even receive the sojourner.
Exactly.
To receive the traveler, whether that's on the street corner or whether that's at our home. We can't slow down enough to even receive people, to even have that moment of seeing them as Christ sees them. And here's the thing, that's the kicker about the monasticism is that I mean, and it talked about it in the rule, like no, even if it's at an adverse time, even if it's at a time that's inconvenient, you still welcome them and you still do these things. And so that slowing down is a critical part to this application because we can't do that. But I would say I'm a busybody and I got to be less of a busybody in order to be more Christ-like. And that's just the bottom line.
So I think one of the things whenever I start talking about hurry, and being able to unhurry, slow down. We often call it slow down spirituality because I heard that phrase from Pete Scarzero and I love that phrase. But that's very much a monastic contemplative practice that I think we need to have in our lives.
Right.
But every time I start to have this conversation or hear this conversation, people talk about how do I slow down? Like how, when my time is so driven by other people, how do I slow down? And there's a couple of things to say just to try to be helpful with that practically real quick.
Yeah.
Number one, it's actually a fallacy to say our time is driven so much by other people because that's not always true. It's most of the appointments we make in life, we make. Like we agree to. We agree to them.
Yeah.
So, and there's times where other people set meetings. We have meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I don't set those meetings.
Right.
So yeah, I need to be there.
Yeah.
But most of the other things in my life, I'm setting those things up. And a lot of the time, I don't have to do them when I do them. I set them up to those things. So I think that's an excuse that we need to stop using. The vast majority of our time is ours.
Yes.
It is ours to make and it is ours to break, to manage and to misuse. And then secondly, I think a rule of life is important to do for ourselves what Benedict did for these monasteries. That a rule of life is a schedule and set of practices and relational rhythms that help us create space in our busy world for us to be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and do what Jesus did. So I know Dentine and I are working through this rule of life workbook.
Yeah.
To kind of set out, okay, what are the daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly practices that we want to center our lives around? How do we want to structure and principle our lives in a way where Jesus is the main goal, not what I'm doing?
Right.
And it's not something that we've completed. It's something that we're working through.
Yeah.
But as I'm slowly starting to implement those things, it's making a huge difference.
Yeah.
So I want to say to our listeners, if you're interested in learning more about a rule of life, and even to go through the same workbook that Dentine and I are going through, it's at practicingtheway.org. And it's under a header called Unhurrying with a Rule of Life.
Really?
They lay it all out there. They've got teachings about what a rule of life is.
Yeah.
How to apply it to today, how to apply it to your life with your personality, your job, all those kinds of things. It has been immensely helpful for us. And we've got a long way to go. But that's one of the tools that's going to help us get there. I really believe that. No, so I wanted to throw that out there for our listeners just as a way to help.
That's a great way to end it. I'll be honest with you. As soon as you said it, I'm like, wait, can I get a workbook too? So I mean, really, I'm going to.
It's a downloadable PDF.
I'm going to click the link in our outline and I'm going to look at it as well because I need that. And I think me and my wife need that as well. And I always appreciate when we bring up a product, you know, just to be helpful. I think that's so good. I think that's so good. But listen, man, I pray that you guys are encouraged. I pray that we all just take heed of this rule, that Benedict wrote, obviously in reference to scripture, in reference to how Jesus wants us to treat other people like him. And that's what the Lord wants from each and every one of us. And so however you can apply that in your life, and I think a big part of it is slowing down.
Yep.
And so however you need to do that, whether it's the workbook, whether it's just, you know, silence, well, I don't know. But I hope we've laid out some practical ways to really just get closer to rolling out the red carpet for really everybody we encounter, you know, and how to do that. So, again, pray that you guys are encouraged. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. And remember to follow us on Instagram at Church Voice Podcast. You can find our Facebook page also at Church Voice Podcast, all one word on both of those. And here, I'm gonna ask you guys one more thing. If you're listening to this right now and you haven't written a review, we would just greatly appreciate that.
Write it down for us.
Yeah. And we want to share those here on the podcast. But listen, we love you guys. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Peace out.
Peace.